for the time being, this is still WVU football going deep. And according to my sources, I am Forrest Poston. I still don't really expect the channel to continue much beyond this. It is not entirely impossible, depending upon my health, cat health, and financial health. Now, the financial health is one of the ways to keep the channel going, because if it looked like it was going to become a viable income source, which would make it more than just an entertainment source, then that would pretty much force me to continue. But, while there are some of the subscribers who particularly like my approach, we have not found enough of them, and subscriptions stalled out. So if you are one of the subscribers who particularly would like me to continue, anything you can do about making it at least look like it's going to be financially viable, if you can dig up subscribers, to the point that I can put a little donate button on the site and that sort of thing, then, I would continue. And partly I am doing this video today because the signing day was unusually interesting. And I want to respond to some of the comments made by the type of fans who make me want to give up this channel. And also did have a request for recruiting information. And I feel too crappy today to do any of the more serious, intense videos that I should be doing. Gee, aren't you lucky? You get me. So, as usual, please subscribe, share. Let's pretend that this is going to continue. Make comments, and all of that good stuff. Now, well, recruiting day was yesterday, or signing day, excuse me, was yesterday. And much to just about everyone's surprise, West Virginia not only signed almost all of the verbal commitments that they had gotten, but also added potentially the best commitment in the class, plus flipping a safety from North Carolina. Of course, North Carolina is also in much the same position, working without a coach. So, but, I mean, when you lose your coach, which means you will eventually lose all or almost all of the coaching staff, and be ashamed to see Blaine Stewart go, if only because of the West Virginia connections, the story. But, I mean, the players know that they are not going to be working with the people who recruited them, or at least not the direct people. Of course, other staff, especially people who aren't hired by the coaches, the head coach, may be around. And now, I expect North Carolina's team and Purdue's team worked hard at retaining these players. Did they work as hard as the West Virginia group? I don't know. But they weren't as successful. I mean, this success is, it's, let us say, at the very least, it's rare to achieve this. Now, of course, what that also means, first of all, is that, Neal Brown and his staff had put together a good class. Now, I mean, is it a top 25 class? No. It's 40 to mid 40s. It's a little better than a lot of years just in terms of the numerical ranking, but it is not the highest ranked class ever. But those numbers don't necessarily translate onto the field, and that's what matters. So I'm going to take a look at the class itself, then going to take a little bit of a look, my take on why they were able to pull this off, and maybe a little bit of how. Of course, I'm not an insider. I don't talk to Ren Baker or anybody within 3, 4, 5, 600 steps of Ren Baker, but I've got guesses. Similar to what some other people are saying and the opposite of what others are saying. We'll get to that. The class itself. We have, I think, total of 21 players, if I'm counting correctly, and don't guarantee that. I am working on days or weeks of insufficient sleep. So I do hope that will be improving. We've kind of, made some steps in that direction. And I mean, you can just kind of look at how this class lays out and figure it was a Neal Brown class because it is tightly planned, balanced. 9 players on offense, 12 on defense. Lean a little toward defense. I mean, that's going to vary year to year based on who you can get and who you need. And on both sides of the ball, it is, again, balanced. You do not have a bunch at one position, nobody at another. You could, of course, only got 9 players on offense, but you could just about field a team based on who they signed. I mean, offense, 1 quarterback, 2 wide receivers, 1 running back, and that's 1 quarterback, 1 running back is pretty much what they plan. Sometimes they'll take a second running back if things are, work out just right or just wrong, whatever. 1 tight end, 4 offensive linemen. Yeah. You've pretty much, you've got 9 guys, but they are spread out into the different positions. And I've said this before, looking at Rodriguez or Holgerson, their recruiting was not precise. They would over-recruit certain spots, under-recruit others, and then try to piece things together. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. Defense, 12 players, and we have 4 offensive linemen. And 3 cornerbacks, 2 safeties. We've got a safety spear linebacker combo, a linebacker edge combo, and Ramondo Johnson expected to be an edge rusher. So, again, you could field a team. Now, we lost a couple of the commitments. I mean, some commitments were gone before signing day. I think I talked about some of that earlier, I think. Maybe not. But we, particularly defensive backs, we replaced them probably with better guys. We signed Dwayne Galloway, and it looked like that was coming. Once he decommitted from Purdue, West Virginia really needed to be considered the front runner. He had visited many, many times, clearly liked it. I mean, Purdue got the edge, I think, because, he had a relative there, and that didn't work out. And we may end up picking up one or two of Galloway's relatives before the whole transfer period is done. That may be interesting enough to get me to do another video. We'll see. But I mean, Galloway, cornerback, one of the top corners in the state of Ohio. That's a good get, and he's fast. Also picked up Russell as a corner. I did talk about him in video, and possibly the fastest player on the team when he's here, once he gets here. So, I mean, speed has been an issue at corner. That wasn't the problem this year. I may do a video on what I think was the problem, but just very quickly, I've come to suspect the design of the schemes themselves, was flawed. Something about, the drop backs and the different patterns. And I mean, I'm not familiar enough with how you draw up a complete scheme, but I have a suspicion that it was the scheme itself, and not because it's a 3-4, a 4-3, whatever, but just what players are expected to do on specific calls, or how they are expected to do it. And when Jeff Koons was talking in one of his, I think his first interview after being moved up, he said more than once that at this point of the season, the schemes you have are the schemes you have. And I didn't think much about it at the time, but I think what he was saying was the schemes aren't right, but they're what you've got. You can't create new schemes with 4 games to go. Now, of course, we're not going to find out really. Probably wouldn't have found out anyway, because a new defensive coordinator would come in and naturally change things. But I have a sneaking suspicion that was the biggest problem. Now, we have 4 players signed who are ranked 4-star by somebody. 3 of them, Taylor Brown, Dwayne Galloway, and Jaleel Hall are all ranked as a 4-star by 24/7, and DeAndre Desanor ranked a 4-star by ESPN. So 4 4-stars in a class when the head coach is gone, the rest of the coaching staff likely to be gone. And several other guys who are 1 or 2 points away from being a 4-star. That is pretty good. And of course, Galloway, committed, he was not even a verbal commitment, and then committed under these circumstances. Now, I'm not going to go over the whole, list of players. I covered the players way back during, some of the verbal commitments. You can go watch that video. I want to talk more about how this happened, why it happened, significance of it happening. Now, there are people out there in the groups saying, well, the fact that the players signed after Brown was fired proves that they weren't really that impressed with Brown, that he wasn't that important. That's a pretty sketchy statement, but you get a few, and these are the ones that just really frustrate me, depress me, and anger me, who are saying that these players signed because Brown was fired, that they are only coming because Brown was fired. And I mean, that's probably not the stupidest thing ever said, but it's on the list. I mean, if you could, say those words and not hit yourself afterwards, you've just got an issue. And it actually, I mean, it reveals a really seriously a psychopathic hatred. I mean, some of these people, they've just focused on Brown so much they do hate him, and they don't think they do. But then they'll call everybody else a Brown lover. If anybody says anything positive, oh, who are you, Brown's wife or whatever. And then you can't communicate with them. You can't. No point trying. And I try. And, now, of course, the fact is, if they disliked Brown, they would never have been a verbal commitment. Galloway, who had not verbally committed, would not have visited over and over again, including paying for his own trips on some of these. The unofficial visits he had to pay for, and he came. So, I mean, if these players hated Brown, their names would not have come up. They would have been way off someplace else. So, I mean, Coach Brown as a person did have something to do with these players signing. Now, why didn't they leave? Because, I mean, first of all, I would pretty near guarantee, and again, I wasn't there, but I'd pretty well guarantee Brown never tried to sell the players on playing for Neal Brown. He recruited them to play for West Virginia University, to play for West Virginia. And he recruited them to play in this culture. This culture he spent the last several years creating, having to first reverse a negative culture, a me-first culture that was there, and get this culture in place that is a very family-oriented culture, that is a team-oriented culture, that is a, give it all culture. Players want to come and play in that culture. And in theory, the culture can stay, even if all the coaches leave. Because you've established the culture. You've got the players as the core of the culture. It's there. And now, I mean, I saw some claims that Coach Brown had actually, contacted commits, to ask them to sign, to keep their commitment. I don't know if he did. It would be in keeping with who he is. But I suspect that part of the big pitch was, we will keep the culture. And, I mean, the man who can say that is Wren Baker. You look at the coaches he has hired. I mean, Neal Brown was nearly a perfect Wren Baker coach, even if Baker didn't hire him. More than once, people have described Brown as, everything you want from a coach except winning enough games. And I do not know why the wheels fell off this season. But I think Baker will hire somebody very, very much like Neal Brown, who is expected to win more games. Neal Brown 2.0, something. I mean, Baker said integrity is one of the major factors. And he said that in his other hirings, and he has followed through. And one of the videos from Ear Sports, they talked about Ren Baker did get on the phone with a few of the recruits. Generally speaking, he wasn't needed. He was just sort of their, emergency closer. But he did talk to some recruits. And again, Ren Baker does represent this type of culture. It is the culture he wants for all of the sports. And I believe since they had established the culture, they could sell it. They could tell the players, come to WVU for the culture that is already here. We have it. You've seen it. You felt it when you visited. We will keep it. We will hire a coach who will, represent that same culture. Maybe a little better. Neal Brown, you can't really represent it better than Neal Brown, but maybe find a way to push the number of wins up. That's the only thing. Neal Brown did not win enough games. Can argue and discuss why not, but that was the eventual issue. You do not want to change anything else. You want more wins, but you want everything else that Neal Brown was doing. I believe that is why the players signed. And so far, there have not been many announcements about the portal. Josiah Trotter is the biggest. T.J. Crandall, currently the second biggest, probably. We almost certainly will have more, but it may not be a lot more for that same reason. The players believe in Ren Baker. Now, if Ren Baker is going to hire for that culture, if he is going to hire for integrity, Rich Rodriguez isn't coming. I certainly hope he's not. Rodriguez, his culture wasn't bad, but it was not this type of culture. Rodriguez is not a Ren Baker coach. And integrity, you won't find integrity anywhere near Rich Rodriguez. I'm sorry. We are talking about a guy who left a mess of NCAA violations at West Virginia and at Michigan. He does not follow rules. So integrity, no. Issues in his personal life, but those are, all of that's years before, but we have a pattern. And he's also not as good a coach as a lot of people think. If he wasn't from West Virginia, and same with Fisher, if these guys were not from West Virginia, fans would not be clamoring for them, to come and be the coach. Rich Rodriguez had 2.5 big years. He had some good years at West Virginia, but he only had 2.5 really big years. And then, of course, with the Pitt game, he screwed that up in a major way. And he had been working towards screwing it up through bad coaching for those 2.5 seasons. From the moment that Pat White and Steve Slayton, Owen Smith, Darius Renaud formed sort of the core. Rodriguez had just made the offense more and more and more predictable because he would not open things up. He would not trust Pat White to pass, especially downfield middle. And Pitt knew that. It had become blatantly obvious by that point. So Pitt just sold out to stop the things that West Virginia did over and over again. They understood the reads. They knew what gaps to stop on what plays. And they shut things down. And once they did it, everybody else would have done it. Now, when he does not have a Pat White, he's not quite as predictable. But he's not an offensive genius. Anyway, I do not think Jimbo Fisher or Rich Rodriguez are serious candidates. I expect certain people among donors and whatever to push for them, to promote them, but they are not what Ren Baker says he wants in a coach. If either of them is hired, then Ren Baker loses every shred of credibility. And I don't think that'll happen, and I certainly hope it won't happen. I didn't think this past season was going to happen the way it did. And as I have said in more than one video, I may be wrong. And I have been wrong. But Neal Brown, has established something very, very good at West Virginia. It did not translate into enough wins. I wish they hadn't fired him. I wish he had won more games. But I can understand why, especially, the way the Texas Tech game went down. I can understand the decision. I wish things were different. They're not. But the culture remains. And that, long term, should be the most important thing. And just have to translate it into more wins, because that is a necessary thing for multiple reasons. Winning is better than losing, if you'll forgive a pseudo Bull Durham quote. All right. I'm not quite ranting, but I am starting to ramble. We have a heck of a class, an amazing thing to get them committed. Now, Ren Baker has to hire a coach who will maintain and build upon the culture that Neal Brown helped create. If he does not, we will lose players. We will gain players, but the whole nature of the team will shift. Okay, I love doing these videos. I love doing it. I wish I could continue this channel. I want to continue this channel, but I don't know if I can continue the channel. If you really want it to continue, you're going to have to help me out in some way. Getting subscribers, or something. I can't. PayPal doesn't like me to publish donation means, but this channel has to make a profit for me to continue. I have to believe that it will make a profit in the relatively near future. All right, I'm going to answer what's almost certainly a spam call. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys later. Bye.